What if I told you that giving up bread for just 30 days could completely change the way your body feels? What if the very foods you've always believed were healthy, like whole wheat, sprouted, or sourdough, were actually spiking your blood sugar almost as fast as candy? And here's the real shocker: whether you eat white bread, Ezekiel bread, or whole grain, the story unfolding inside your body may not be what you think. Hello everyone, I am Dr. Nana, and today we're going to take a deep dive into bread, what really happens when you stop eating it, and why the effects can be so dramatic. First, let's start with what bread actually is. About 80% of bread's weight is starch. Starch is what scientists call a polysaccharide, which simply means it's made up of many sugar molecules, glucose, linked together in long chains and branches. Imagine hundreds, even thousands of tiny sugar beads strung together. That's starch. Now, here's the issue. You've probably been told for years that simple sugars are bad but complex carbohydrates are good. The reality? Within seconds of eating bread, your body begins breaking those chains apart. Glucose molecules flood into your bloodstream, and that glucose is identical to sugar. That means your blood sugar rises quickly, and so does insulin. Not all of the starch breaks down instantly, but the process of raising blood sugar and insulin starts right away. So what happens if you cut bread for just 30 days? You'll likely see significant benefits. Your blood glucose will drop. Your A1C, the 3 to 4 month average of your blood sugar, will start trending downward. Your fasting insulin levels will also improve, and with them, a marker called HOMA-I, which measures insulin resistance. If you're someone leaning toward diabetes, removing bread can start shifting your blood values toward a healthier range. That's powerful, and it can happen in just weeks. But there's more. Many people struggle with digestive discomfort, things like bloating and gas. So where does that come from? Gas is produced by the bacteria in your digestive tract. But here's the key: they can only make gas if you feed them, and what they love most are carbohydrates. Not just sugar and bread, but virtually all carbs. Here's how it plays out. When you eat, food first lands in the stomach. Some glucose is absorbed right there, but most continues into the small intestine. That's a long, winding tube where digestion takes hours. As food moves through, complex carbs gradually break down and release more glucose. Ideally, by the time food reaches the large intestine, nearly all carbohydrates should already be absorbed. The only thing left should be fiber, which our bodies can't digest. The large intestine is where most of our gut bacteria live, billions of them in every milliliter. The small intestine, on the other hand, should only contain a few thousand. So here's the trade-off. With simple carbs, they get absorbed too quickly to reach the bacteria, but they spike your blood sugar. With complex carbs, they travel further down the tract, where they become food for bacteria, often causing bloating, gas, and discomfort. That's why for many people, whole wheat bread can actually feel worse than white bread. It takes longer to digest, giving bacteria more time to ferment it. And then there's a condition called SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Normally, the small intestine should have very few bacteria. But if the ileocecal valve, the tight barrier between the small and large intestine, doesn't close properly, bacteria can creep upward. Suddenly, instead of thousands, you've got tens or even hundreds of thousands of bacteria living in the wrong place. Now, when carbs aren't fully absorbed, those bacteria feast on them, producing gas, bloating, and sometimes severe discomfort. For people with SIBO, bread and other carbohydrate-rich foods can be a constant source of pain. So, when you think about what happens if you stop eating bread for 30 days, it's not just about lowering blood sugar, it's also about reducing digestive stress and cutting off the fuel that harmful bacteria thrive on. And this is just the beginning, because in page 2, we're going to explore how widespread this problem really is worldwide and why bread, blood sugar, and chronic disease are more connected than you might think. As we talked about in page 1, cutting out bread can ease digestion, reduce bloating, and lower blood sugar. But the bigger story is this: bread itself is not as timeless as many people assume. A lot of people ask, if bread causes so many problems, how could humans have been eating it for thousands of years? It's a fair question. After all, bread feels like it has always been part of our culture. But when you step back and look at human history, the timeline tells a very different story. Humans, in our current genetic form, have been around for about 250,000 years. For almost all of that time, we lived as hunter-gatherers. That means our DNA, the very code that shapes how our bodies function, was shaped by a lifestyle of hunting, fishing, and gathering plants. Now, did our ancestors ever encounter grains? Yes, but only in very small amounts. There were just a few species available, and people might stumble across some wild grains here and there. They might toss a handful into a stew or chew them as they were, but grains were rare, and they certainly weren't a major part of the diet. That all changed about 10,000 years ago with the birth of agriculture. On a timeline of 250,000 years, this shift is just a sliver, a tiny red band compared to the vast history of humans. And even then, agriculture gave us only a handful of grain species to choose from. These early grains remained relatively stable for millennia. From the time of the Egyptians through the Roman Empire, grains didn't change very much. But the real transformation came in the last 50 years. Modern agriculture began hybridizing and manipulating grain DNA, especially wheat. Through breeding and genetic experimentation, we now have modern wheat, a food that looks similar to what our ancestors ate, but is, in truth, very different. Today, there are over 25,000 varieties of wheat, yet most of them are far removed from their original forms. To put this into perspective, imagine stretching the entire 10,000 years of agriculture across a long timeline. The introduction of modern hybrid wheat would show up as nothing more than a thin yellow line, a pixel-wide blip. That's how new it really is. So what changed with modern wheat? Farmers and scientists optimized it for yield and durability. These grains produce higher harvests, resist pests and harsh weather, and perform beautifully in baking. They were designed to create elastic, fluffy, bouncy bread perfect for mass production. But here's the problem. Little thought was given to how the human body tolerates these changes. Modern wheat wasn't bred with human health in mind. It was engineered for farming efficiency and commercial baking. Does that automatically make it harmful? Not necessarily. But it certainly doesn't give us confidence either. We know that foods like meat, fish, fruits, and vegetables have been part of our diet for hundreds of thousands of years. Our DNA knows how to handle them. With modern grains, it's more of a gamble. The more they are altered, the less likely our bodies are to tolerate them. Well, and remember, the goal of eating is simple: to get nutrients. Yet grains bring with them something else: anti-nutrients. These are natural compounds that interfere with our ability to absorb or digest what we eat. One major anti-nutrient is phytates. Phytates bind tightly to minerals like calcium, magnesium, iron, and zinc. When those minerals are bound, our bodies cannot absorb them. In other words, even if the minerals are in the food, phytates lock them away, preventing us from benefiting. Grains also contain enzyme inhibitors. Your DNA is programmed to produce enzymes that break down proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. But when enzyme inhibitors are present, they block those enzymes, making digestion incomplete. This especially affects protein digestion, a critical process for growth, repair, and energy. Some of the main enzyme inhibitors found in grains include oxalates, tannins, and gluten. And gluten, of course, deserves its own deep dive. Gluten has captured nearly all the attention in the debate about bread and health. But here's the truth. Gluten isn't just one thing. It's actually a mixture of hundreds of proteins. These proteins can be grouped into two broad categories. One group is called glutenins. Think of glutenins like stretchy strands. They provide elasticity, allowing dough to stretch without breaking. They're what make bread soft yet chewy, able to rise and hold its shape. And while that's great for baking, it's not always so great for digestion. Because when those proteins reach your gut, your body may not break them down completely. For many people, this creates a cascade of problems ranging from mild discomfort to serious health issues. So when we look at bread through this evolutionary lens, the picture becomes much clearer. For most of human history, bread simply wasn't there. Grains were rare. Agriculture only started recently in the grand timeline, and modern wheat as we know it today is just a blink of an eye experiment. Add to that the anti-nutrients like phytates, enzyme inhibitors, oxalates, tannins, lectins, and gluten, and you begin to see why so many people experience issues with bread. And this brings us to the heart of the matter. Is modern bread truly nourishing us, or is it working against our health in ways we're only now beginning to understand? That's the question we'll carry forward. Because in page 3, we'll take a closer look at gluten itself, why it has become such a controversial subject, and how this one protein group has shaped the way we view bread and health today. As we saw in page 2, Grains bring challenges like anti-nutrients and enzyme inhibitors. But perhaps the most famous and most controversial issue with wheat is gluten. Gluten is not a single protein. It's actually a family of hundreds of proteins, grouped into two main categories. One group is called glutenins. These act like strands of elastic, giving dough its stretchy quality. The other group is gliadins, which help dough rise during baking. Together, glutenins and gliadins are what make bread fluffy, bouncy, and so appealing to bakers and eaters alike. Wheat is unique in this respect. No other grain creates that same texture. Now, many people believe gluten is only a problem if you have celiac disease. Roughly 1% of the population has celiac, where the intestinal barrier is already badly damaged. For them, even the tiniest amount of gluten acts like gasoline on a fire, causing severe inflammation and worsening the condition. But gluten sensitivity doesn't stop there. There's another group often overlooked, known as non-celiac gluten sensitivity. These people don't test positive for celiac, yet they still develop noticeable symptoms when they eat gluten. How is that possible? It comes down to something called intestinal barrier resistance. Think of the lining of your intestines like a security gate. It's not simply open or closed. It can be strong, weak, or somewhere in between. Every time you eat gluten, it challenges that barrier. If your resistance slips from strong to weak, you may begin to experience problems. For people with non-celiac sensitivity, the barrier becomes compromised enough to trigger symptoms like bloating, brain fog, or fatigue, even though standard medical tests may not detect celiac disease. Studies suggest about 13% of the population report these reactions. And remember, that figure only includes people paying attention and willing to report their symptoms. In reality, the number is likely much higher. In Dr. Nana's clinical experience, wheat shows up again and again as the #1 food sensitivity. Even among people who don't notice immediate effects, gluten still weakens the barrier. That means over time, most people benefit from reducing or avoiding gluten, whether or not they think it bothers them. But gluten isn't the only troublemaker in wheat. Another class of proteins called lectins also create serious issues. The main one in wheat is wheat germ agglutinin. So, what exactly are lectins? They are sticky proteins that love to attach to cells, particularly epithelial cells, the cells that make up our body's protective barriers. You have epithelial cells on your skin, but also on the inner lining of your gut and blood vessels. Inside your small intestine, you have villi, which look like tiny fingers, and even smaller microvilli, forming a brush border to increase absorption. On top of those, microvilli are little carbohydrate antennas. Wheat germ agglutinin sticks to those antennas like glue, clinging tightly and refusing to let go. This sticky interaction puts stress on your gut lining, creating irritation and inflammation. Over time, it damages the brush border and contributes to a condition often called leaky gut. When that lining weakens, large particles slip through into the bloodstream, particles your immune system is not supposed to see. The immune system then attacks them, and in the process, it can begin attacking your own tissues. This is how lectins are linked to autoimmunity. And the impact doesn't stop at the gut. Remember, epithelial cells also line your blood vessels. When lectins attach there, they can increase leakiness in those vessels as well. This creates openings that allow damaged LDL cholesterol particles to slip beneath the vessel wall, contributing to inflammation, plaque buildup, and ultimately cardiovascular disease. So, whether it's gluten weakening your intestinal barrier or lectins damaging your gut and blood vessels, the story of bread goes far beyond just empty calories. It's a story of proteins and compounds actively working against your health in ways many people never realize. And this leads us directly into our next chapter. Because while gluten and lectins explain much of the problem, there are still more anti-nutrients and hidden factors in grains that continue to shape the debate. In page 4, we'll explore those cofactors and nutrients more closely, how they interact with bread, and what this means for your long-term health. In page 3, we explored how gluten and lectins can weaken the gut lining and even harm blood vessels. But the story doesn't end there, because lectins reach even further into your body's delicate systems. One of their biggest targets is the brush border, the microscopic layer of your small intestine where vital enzymes are made. These enzymes are responsible for breaking down food into usable nutrients. But when lectins attach to the brush border, they don't just inflame it, they also disrupt enzyme production. Without those enzymes, digestion weakens, and your ability to absorb essential nutrients declines. And it goes further. Research shows that lectins can also interfere with insulin receptors. Instead of keeping blood sugar balanced, they push your body toward insulin resistance. This means more insulin circulating, more fat storage, and a greater tendency to develop type 2 diabetes. On top of that, lectins can block leptin, the hormone that tells your brain you've had enough to eat. When leptin is blocked, your satiety signal never arrives, you just keep eating, unaware that your body is already full. Now consider what happens if you cut out bread for just 30 days. By removing wheat, you also cut out phytates, which means minerals like iron, zinc, and magnesium can finally be absorbed properly. You eliminate gluten and lectins, which allows the gut barrier to heal. Over time, your leaky gut improves, inflammation decreases, and nutrient absorption rises. That chain reaction supports better digestion and lowers your risk for conditions like irritable bowel syndrome, autoimmunity, and a whole range of gut complaints. The benefits don't stop with the digestive tract. As insulin and leptin signaling improve, you reduce your risk of type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and even high blood pressure. With better satiety and fewer cravings, weight control becomes far easier. Many people find that once bread is out of their diet, the endless hunger fades and natural weight loss follows. But of course, not everyone agrees. Some people argue, bread is too important. It's a staple. It has shaped civilization itself. And they're right, grains and agriculture did transform human society. By cultivating grain, early humans no longer had to spend every waking hour hunting and gathering. Agriculture allowed specialization. Some could farm, while others became teachers, merchants, builders, and innovators. Without grain, modern civilization as we know it might not exist. Grain also allowed humanity to feed the masses, fueling population growth on a scale that changed the planet. But here's the crucial point. Just because grains played that role in history doesn't mean we're locked into them forever. Today, the world is different. Population growth is slowing, resources and technology are more advanced than ever, and we're capable of creating sustainable systems that don't rely exclusively on wheat. We can grow a wider variety of crops. We can bring back ancient grains that are gentler on the body. And we can build farming practices that prioritize health as much as efficiency. Will higher quality food cost more? Yes, in many cases it will. Anytime quality improves, price tends to rise. But often the cost difference isn't nearly as large as people imagine. And here's the perspective shift. You either invest in better food now or you pay later in medical bills, suffering, and lost years of health. So when we think about bread, it's not just about convenience or tradition. It's about choosing whether we want to keep fueling a cycle of inflammation and disease or step toward a future where food truly supports our bodies. And that brings us directly into page 5, where we'll take this conversation one step further. What optimal really looks like when it comes to diet, nutrients, and the choices that protect your long-term health. In page 4, we looked at how bread affects gut health, hormones, and long-term disease risk. But there's still one more critical piece to cover: the economic and practical side of our food choices. Right now in the United States, we spend about 8% of our disposable income on food, yet over 20% on sick care. Think about that. We cut corners on what fuels our bodies, then spend more than double trying to fix the damage later. It's a system built on patchwork, keeping people alive, but never truly solving the root problem. And bread itself isn't just about wheat anymore. If you're buying it from the grocery store, chances are it's loaded with additives, seed oils, trans fats, dough conditioners, emulsifiers, preservatives. One of the worst offenders is potassium bromate, a chemical banned in many countries, but still used in some American bread. Cutting bread for 30 days doesn't just ease the burden on your blood sugar and digestion, it also lightens the toxic load on your liver and kidneys, the organs working hardest to filter those substances out. Now let's clear up some confusion, because people often ask, aren't some breads good and others bad? White bread versus wheat, bread versus whole grain, it all sounds different. But here's the truth, it's all wheat. White bread is simply refined. The bran and germ are stripped away, leaving only the starchy center, the endosperm, where most of the starch and gluten live. Whole wheat, by contrast, grinds down the entire kernel. So, what's the difference when it comes to your body? Blood sugar impact? Practically the same. Despite the marketing, whole grain only has about a 1% advantage over white bread in terms of glycemic load. That's not enough to matter. Nutrients? Here's where white bread collapses. Once the bran and germ are removed, you lose minerals, vitamins, and fiber. It's like eating sugar in disguise: white sugar, white flour, white trash, as some call it. Whole grain at least retains those nutrients. But that's not the whole story. Because with wheat, you also have to consider anti-nutrients. Remember phytates, enzyme inhibitors, and lectins. Whole grain carries more of them, especially in the outer shell. So while you're getting fiber and some extra vitamins, you're also taking in more compounds that block absorption or trigger sensitivities. And gluten? That's concentrated in the endosperm, which means both white and whole wheat carry plenty of it. So if we weigh it all out, white bread equals worse for nutrients, stripped and empty. Whole wheat equals better for fiber, but often worse for sensitivities. Gluten and blood sugar impact equals nearly the same for both. This is why many people find that avoiding wheat altogether, not just swapping white for whole grain, brings the biggest health benefits. But let's not stop at modern wheat. There's a whole other category worth considering: ancient grains. These varieties existed long before heavy hybridization changed wheat forever. Compared to modern wheat, they usually have 2 to 2.5 times more protein, which balances the starch and blunts blood sugar spikes. Nutrients and anti-nutrients in ancient grains are similar to whole wheat, but when it comes to gluten and lectins, the story improves. Over the last 50 years, wheat was deliberately bred to contain more gluten to make bread fluffier, more elastic, more appealing. But that also made it harder for many people to digest. With ancient grains, the gluten profile is different, and for many people who struggle with modern wheat, these grains cause little to no reaction. Of course, if you have severe celiac disease or extreme sensitivities, even ancient grains won't work. But for those who simply feel off with modern wheat bloating, fatigue, brain fog, ancient grains can often be tolerated much better. So whether we're talking about refined white bread, so-called healthy whole wheat, or alternative ancient grains, the key is understanding the trade-offs. Bread may be woven into culture and history, but that doesn't mean it has to dominate your plate today. And that sets us up for the final chapter. In page 6, we'll bring everything together: the full picture of why giving up bread, even for just 30 days, can reset your health in ways you might not believe. By now, you might be wondering, okay, but what if the bread is organic? Doesn't that make it safe? The truth is, unfortunately, no. Whether the wheat is organic or not, all of the issues we've discussed remain the same: blood sugar spikes, gluten, lectins, phytates, anti-nutrients. The only difference is that with organic bread, you'll likely be exposed to fewer pesticides and synthetic chemicals. And yes, that's a small improvement, but it doesn't erase the fundamental problems we've uncovered. Another common question: what about Ezekiel bread? Isn't that healthier? Ezekiel bread has become trendy because it's made from sprouted grains. Sometimes it even includes ancient grains. Sprouting does help. It breaks down some starches, boosts certain nutrients, and even reduces a portion of lectins. But here's the key: it doesn't eliminate the core issues. You'll still be dealing with gluten, with gut permeability challenges, and with blood sugar spikes. So while Ezekiel may be slightly better, it's not the miracle solution people hope for. Now, let's talk about why bread feels so addictive. For some people, giving it up is almost impossible. Bread doesn't just comfort, it hooks. Why? Because gluten breaks down into fragments called polypeptides, some of which are known as gluteomorphins. These compounds act like morphine. They actually cross the blood-brain barrier and bind to opiate receptors, the very same pleasure receptors that respond to addictive drugs. Sounds dramatic, doesn't it? But scientists proved this connection in a fascinating way. When a heroin addict overdoses, doctors use a drug called naloxone to block the opiate receptors and save their life. Researchers gave that same drug to people at a buffet where bread was plentiful. The result? Those people ate 33% fewer calories. Think about that. By blocking gluteomorphins, their desire for bread and food in general dropped significantly. At first, people thought they'd found the perfect weight loss drug. But the problem is deeper. Those opiate receptors are part of our natural reward system. They're not random. They exist because our bodies are wired to pursue pleasure, energy, and satisfaction. Blocking them doesn't just reduce cravings, it also reduces joy, motivation, and mood. That's why using drugs like this can lead to depression. Imagine needing an anti-heroin drug just to eat bread paired with an antidepressant to offset the side effects. That's the endless cycle of the modern medical model. Block one pathway, then treat the fallout with another drug, then another, and another. But here's the good news. Your body was designed to balance itself. When you cut bread for 30 days, yes, you may go through mild withdrawal, cravings, irritability, maybe even low mood. But within just a few days, the fog begins to lift. Your system recalibrates. Suddenly, your mood stabilizes, your focus sharpens, your energy evens out. It's like pulling out of a storm into clear skies. You notice calm, clarity, and stability. And that's why I always recommend, don't take my word for it, try it for yourself. Commit to 30 days. No bread, no, just one slice. No excuses. But here's the secret, don't just notice the changes in passing. Write them down. Track how your digestion feels. Notice your cravings. Pay attention to your energy, your mood, your sleep. Because when you see it on paper, the difference becomes undeniable. After 30 days, you'll have a choice. You can stay off bread completely or you can carefully reintroduce it. But if you do reintroduce, don't go back to the modern, hybridized wheat that dominates grocery store shelves. Try some of the ancient grains, einkorn, emmer, spelt, comet, rye. These varieties are often far easier on digestion, with less reactive gluten and fewer lectins. And remember, moderation is key. Bread should be an occasional add-on, not the foundation of every meal. Definitely not 8-11 servings a day, as once recommended. So, let's bring this all together. Bread has shaped civilizations, but it has also shaped modern health struggles. From insulin resistance and weight gain to gut inflammation and autoimmune risk, the impact is far-reaching. Cutting bread for 30 days is not about deprivation, it's about discovery. It's about giving your body the chance to reset, to heal, to show you what life feels like without the constant drag of modern wheat. And here's my challenge to you. Try it. Just 30 days. You may be surprised at how much better you feel, and once you experience that difference, you'll never look at bread the same way again. I'm Dr. Nana, and I want to thank you for joining me here on Senior Health Boost. If this video helped open your eyes, imagine how much more you can learn by staying with us. So do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to Senior Health Boost, and turn on notifications. That way, you'll never miss another life-changing video because your health is too important to leave to chance. Until next time, take charge of your health, trust your body's wisdom, and I'll see you in the next video.